Death is not something that most of us feel comfortable with. As humans, it's something that we pretty much deny. And this is evolutionary because if we were preoccupied with death as a species, we would not have ever taken the risks necessary to ensure the survival and evolution of our species. And when death arrives in our lives, we are often woefully unprepared. And when it happens to somebody else, a friend, a colleague, a family member, we are often completely dumbstruck. You just don't know what to say. In this video, I'm going to share some suggestions about how you should prepare yourself to deal with someone else's grief. And then I'm going to go through the don'ts, the things that you should not do, and the things that you should not say to somebody who is grieving a painful loss. Then I'm going to go through the most helpful things that you should do to help your friend or family member or colleague who has experienced the loss of somebody that they love. And I'm going to give some suggestions about helpful things to say to that person. So the first thing is that you need to prepare yourself to handle your own emotions. Grief is heavy, it is difficult, and you might find that someone else's grief actually triggers some grief of yours, a loss that you went through. Even if it doesn't trigger anything in you, it's very likely that you might feel awkward and uncomfortable around the rawness and the intense pain and intensity of somebody else's deep loss and grief. You might feel empathy grief. You might feel overwhelmed and unable to handle it. And you might feel that you need to fix the other person or rescue them from the depth of their pain. The first thing is to accept that you cannot do that. Grief is a journey, and people who are grieving need to travel along that journey at their own pace and in their own way. So start off by acknowledging that there might be difficult emotions that you're feeling. Allow yourself to feel however you need to feel, and prepare yourself for the fact that it is going to be difficult. So let's go through the don'ts. Don't offer platitudes or reassurances or share your religious or spiritual beliefs. Don't explain to the person who is grieving why the other person is gone. Don't suggest that they hide their grief because they're embarrassing themselves in some way, or because you think that they need to be strong. Don't hug the grieving person without permission. They may not feel up to being touched. They might feel very, very fragile. So don't just rush up to them and wrap your arms around them, unless, of course, you already have that kind of relationship in place. But in general, keep your body language respectful. Don't expect them to comfort you. Don't start crying and wailing because you have been overtaken by empathy grief. So let me tell you the worst things that you can possibly say to someone who's grieving. I've made a list, and this list is not all encompassing, but it is hopefully helpful in guiding you in what to say to someone who is bereaved. If in the past you've already done these things or said these things to someone who is grieving, don't beat yourself up. The past is the past, and hopefully the grieving person knew that your intentions were good. But going forward, please do not say the following things to someone who's grieving. There's a reason for everything. I know how you feel. I know exactly how you feel. The person who was lost is in a much better place. He or she is in heaven now. And all things like God took him or her because he or she was such a good person that God wanted them to be with him. Don't say he or she had done everything that they came here to this earth to do and it was their time. Don't say anything that starts with the words "at least." like at least you still have whatever, or at least they had a long life, or at least they did a lot of things before they passed. This is not helpful. Don't tell them that they need to be strong. Don't tell a grieving person that they need to pull themselves together and be strong for anybody, even their own children. They need to grieve their own way, and it is not helpful to tell someone to be strong. Don't tell a grieving person that they need to move on, that it's time to get over it, that they need to focus on the future, that they need to move forward. Don't tell them that they can still have another child or meet another partner. Don't tell them that time heals all. And don't tell them that the deceased person somehow brought this onto themselves. The person who is bereaved, the person who is grieving, might tell you some of these things. And if that's the case, that is completely fine. They can say these things, but you can't say these things to them, because it is not comforting. When somebody is in the midst of serious pain and grief and loss, the last thing they need to hear is any kind of platitude or reassurance that is intended to make them feel better, intended to fix them, intended to rescue them from their pain. Because you know what? When you are doing that, when you're offering these things to somebody else to rescue them from your pain, what you're actually doing is you're rescuing yourself from your pain and from your discomfort, because you don't feel comfortable with them expressing these intense emotions around you. And you want them to stop. Don't do that. Let them express whatever they need to express. My name is Karen. I'm a clinical psychologist, and my mission is to bring mental health and understanding about mental health into everyone's home. If you like this video, please click the like and subscribe buttons and turn on that notification bell. It's super helpful in terms of not only the algorithm, of course, but also in terms of supporting me in my mission to make these videos. So now let me go through the do's, the things that you should do around and for someone who's grieving. The first thing is silence yourself. Sit with your own difficult feelings and sit with their pain. Grief comes in waves. It rises in a wave of intensity and then falls. And it is a process that takes time. In the early stages of someone's grieving, the waves are very large and they come very close together. But over time, these waves will begin to be further apart. They may still be incredibly intense when they happen, but the period between the waves becomes longer over time. Grief is a process. It's a process that takes time. You can't rush them through it. In terms of what you should do and the things that you should say, take what resonates with you and your personality and your relationship with the person who's grieving and use it appropriately. If the grieving person is crying and they need a tissue, then pass them a tissue. In fact, pass them a box of tissues, because one tissue is probably not going to cut it, especially if they're crying hard. If it is possible for you to visit in person, then visit in person. It can be really hard for the grieving person to fend all the calls and texts that they get. However, if you can't visit in person, then definitely try and call. And if you can't get through on the phone, or if there's a reason why you don't want to call, then do send a text. It is important to acknowledge the person's loss. If you can, bring food. It is super helpful. When you're grief-stricken, you can barely think straight. You can barely think at all. You're probably not very organized around meals and shopping and this kind of thing. So if anyone brings food, it is really helpful. Even if they don't eat it, the gesture of bringing food is very comforting. If you can't visit, it's completely okay to call or send texts, but don't necessarily expect a response. People who are grief-stricken may be completely unable to formulate a response, or they might not even feel able to read your messages. If that's the case, that's okay. Give them the space that they need. Offer practical help. You know, when someone passes, there is a lot of admin, a lot. Offer practical help with the admin. Offer practical help with the chores, with the food, with the shopping. This kind of practical support is incredibly useful to someone who's grieving. Even if they can drive, offer to drive them to where they need to go. They might not feel okay to drive at this time. You see, the thing is, when someone is in the midst, the throes of painful and tearing grief, there really isn't much that you can say. But there are quite a few things that you can do. So if you're able, then offer practical help and do things to support the person who's grieving or the family that's grieving. In terms of things to say, there are some things which are helpful to say, and I'm going to give you a list. And my suggestion, again, is to take what resonates with you from this list and formulate it according to your style and according to your relationship with the person who is grieving. I am so sorry for your loss. This seems obvious as a thing to say, but believe me, it is probably the most helpful thing that you can say. I have no words, but please know that I care about you deeply, or I love you deeply. I can't imagine what you must be feeling. I'm so sorry. I'm here to help in any way that I can. Would you like me to sit with you? Is it okay if I give you a hug? If the grieving person says yes, they would like you to sit with them, then sit with them and don't feel the need to fill every silence with chatter. Just be with the person who's grieving. You can say, do you want to talk about it? If they do want to talk, then mostly just listen in an encouraging and accepting way to whatever they want to talk about and whatever they want to say. It is not your job to provide answers or solutions unless the issues that the person is talking about are practical, in which case then it is helpful to give practical assistance. You can say things like, everybody needs help at a time like this. Is there anything that I can help you with? I'd like to help. What can I do to make things just a little bit easier? Would you like to tell me something about the person who has passed? I know I knew them too, but not like you did. Would you like to hear a story that I have about the person? If they would like to hear a story, then go ahead and share a positive memory or a positive experience that you had with the person who's passed. If they don't want to hear, then of course respect that. Ask, would you like to go for a walk? Would you like to go for a drive? Often it can be really helpful when you're grieving to just move, because grief is so heavy, it weighs you down. But if the person does not want to go for a drive or a walk, then let them. The most important thing is to take your cues from the person who is grieving. Follow their lead. If they seem to want to talk, then listen. If they want to hear stories about the person who passed from you, then go ahead. Tell them. Share positive memories and experiences. If they want to go for a walk, then walk with them. If they want to tell you why they think the person passed, or tell you the things that they think about the whole experience of death and what it means, then listen. Allow them to express what they want to express, to say what they want to say, to be silent when they want to be silent, or to do something when they want to do it. Apart from taking your cues from the person who is grieving, my last suggestion is, as the time passes, do not completely avoid the topic. Don't pretend like nothing happened. Don't invite the person out and not check in with them. You know, when you have lost someone, one of the hardest things is feeling like they're forgotten, like their memory isn't sacred and special. And as the person gradually heals from the worst of the grief, or as the waves at least become further and further apart, they may begin to find the place where they can celebrate the life of the person who is gone. So, in the weeks and months following the painful loss, check in with the grieving person. Ask them how they're doing. Ask them if they'd like to talk. Ask them if they'd like to share a story. If this video was helpful to you or useful to you in any way, then please click the like and subscribe buttons. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.